My crush Mateo held my hand after biology class and asked me not to watch. When he live-streamed, his sewers lied. During fourth period tomorrow, I called 911 to save his life. 3 years later, at graduation, he slipped a note in my locker that said, "You took my choice away. Now I'm going to take everything from you, piece by piece, until you understand what it's like to lose control." I was 15 when my crush Mateo pulled me aside after biology class. "We've been close since I need you to promise me something," he whispered, his pretty eyes not meeting mine. For a moment I thought he was going to ask me to the dance. I'd been working up the courage for weeks, but something in his voice made my chest tighten. "Anything," I said. That's when he told me about Friday, how he'd been planning it for months. The teachers who ignored his cries for help, his parents who only cared about his grades. He'd taken his dad's firearm from the locked drawer. The next day he was going to publicly end his life. He'd planned it all out. A live stream during fourth period, when Ms. Harper would be teaching, when Mr. Bennett would be in the faculty lounge, when everyone who'd failed him would be watching. He'd make sure they'd see, make sure they'd carry it forever. "But not you," he said, squeezing my hand. "Don't watch. You're the only one who ever really saw me." I stood there frozen, feeling his fingers intertwined with mine, something I dreamed about for months. But not like this. Never like this. "Mateo, you can't," I whispered. "It's the only way they'll learn," he said. "The only way things will change." That night I didn't sleep. I stared at his Instagram, scrolling through photos where his smile never quite reached his eyes. Had I missed it? The way he'd stopped eating lunch? How he wore long sleeves even when it was warm? The poems he'd started posting. Beautiful but dark. So dark. I thought about Ms. Harper, who was tough but had 3 kids at home. Mr. Bennett, who was new and trying his best. The other students who'd see it happen live. The trauma that would ripple through our school like a stone dropped in still water. But Mateo trusted me. He'd held my hand. He'd chosen me to confide in. Wasn't that worth something? By the time 3 a.m. hit, I was typing and deleting texts to him. What if I was overreacting? What if he hated me forever? What if I lost the only boy who'd ever made me feel like I mattered? Then I imagined the alternative. His empty desk in biology. His parents at a funeral instead of graduation. A live stream that could never be unseen. All because I stayed silent. At 5 a.m., I called the sewer slide prevention hotline. They connected me to the police. My voice cracked as I explained everything. The officer's tone grew urgent, asking for details I wished I didn't have. Mateo's full name, his address, the exact time he'd mentioned. "You're saving his life," the officer said. It felt like I was ending it. They got to Mateo at 7:30 a.m., just as he was setting up his phone in his bedroom. The pills were already laid out. The note was already written. The local news called it a mental health crisis intervention. They interviewed our principal, who promised better resources, more counselors, real change. They never used our names, but Mateo knew. He didn't come back to school for 2 months. When he did, he wouldn't look at me, wouldn't answer my texts. His new friends formed a protective wall around him in the hallways. I heard whispers, that I'd betrayed him, that I'd violated his trust, that I only did it because I couldn't handle rejection. The school did change. They hired 2 new counselors, started a peer support program, trained teachers on warning signs. Everyone said I'd done the right thing, but I felt like I'd lost everything. 3 years later on graduation day, I found a note in my locker. I instantly recognized Mateo's handwriting. What I read made my heart drop. The note was short, but each word felt like a knife twisting in my gut. "You took my choice away. You made me live when I wanted to die. Now I'm going to take everything from you piece by piece, until you understand what it feels like to lose control of your own life. This isn't over. M." My hands shook as I stuffed the note into my pocket. The graduation ceremony was starting in 20 minutes. My parents were already in the auditorium, saving seats. My cap and gown hung in my locker, waiting. But all I could think about was Mateo, somewhere in this building, planning something. I rushed through the hallways, checking every classroom, every bathroom. Nothing. The school felt eerily empty, with most people already gathering in the auditorium. My footsteps echoed off the walls as I searched, my heart pounding harder with each empty room. Then I saw him. He stood at the end of the main hallway wearing his graduation gown, his back to me. When he turned around, his face showed no emotion, just cold calculation. He held up his phone and pressed record. I froze. He walked toward me slowly, deliberately, keeping the camera trained on my face. When he was close enough that I could smell his cologne, the same fresh scent from 3 years ago, he spoke in a voice loud enough for the recording. "Why are you following me? I already told you to leave me alone." I opened my mouth to respond, but he stepped closer, lowering his voice to a whisper only I could hear. "One word and I'll scream. Who do you think they'll believe? The boy who almost unalived himself because of bullying? Or the girl who betrayed his trust?" He stepped back, raising his voice again for the camera. "Please, just go away. I don't want any trouble." Then he turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, paralyzed. I understood now. This was his game. He was building a narrative, creating evidence. But evidence of what? I made it to graduation, but I couldn't focus. Every time I scanned the crowd, I found Mateo's eyes on me. He sat 3 rows ahead with his family, the picture of a recovering survivor. When they called his name, he got a standing ovation. The boy who'd overcome so much, the success story. When they called mine, the applause was polite but subdued. I saw the looks. Some people still remembered the rumors from 3 years ago. The girl who'd called the police on a vulnerable boy. The betrayer. After the ceremony, my parents wanted to take pictures. As we posed by the school sign, I noticed Mateo in the background of every shot, always watching, always recording with his phone. My mom noticed my distraction. "Everything okay, honey?" I forced a smile and nodded. What could I say? That the boy whose life I'd saved was now stalking me? That he'd threatened me? They'd think I was paranoid? Or worse, that I was the one harassing him. The next few days passed in a blur of graduation parties and college preparation. I tried to push Mateo from my mind, telling myself it was just an empty threat. Maybe he just needed to vent his anger. Maybe it would pass. Then the posts started appearing. First, it was subtle. A photo on Instagram from someone's graduation party. In the background, barely visible, was me looking in Mateo's direction. The caption read, "Great party." Though some people clearly can't take a hint, then a video surfaced on TikTok, security footage from the school hallway showing me following Mateo. The video was edited, cutting out the part where he'd waited for me, showing only me walking behind him. The comments were brutal, creepy behavior. This is why he tried to, some girls just can't handle rejection. I reported the video, but more kept appearing, each one carefully edited, each one painting me as an obsessed stalker who couldn't leave him alone. My Instagram started getting flooded with messages from strangers calling me horrible names. My Facebook was bombarded with friend requests from fake accounts. I tried reaching out to mutual friends, but Mateo had gotten to them first. He'd shown them the videos, told them how I'd been following him, how scared he was. They believed him. Why wouldn't they? He was the victim. He was the one who'd almost died. My parents started noticing my mood changes. I was jumpy, constantly checking my phone, barely sleeping. They asked if something was wrong, but I couldn't find the words. How could I explain that my act of saving someone had turned into my own nightmare? 2 weeks after graduation, I was at the grocery store when I felt someone watching me. I turned to see Mateo at the end of the aisle, phone in hand. He smiled and waved, then typed something. Seconds later, my phone buzzed. A photo of me in the cereal aisle. The caption, "Can't even shop without her showing up, this is getting scary." I abandoned my cart and left immediately, but the damage was done. By the time I got home, the photo was already circulating in our city's Facebook group. People were commenting about calling the police, about protecting Mateo, about how someone should do something about that girl. My mom was waiting in the kitchen when I walked in. Her face was pale, her laptop open on the counter. "We need to talk," she said. She'd seen the posts, the videos, the comments. She wanted to know what was really going on. I tried to explain, but even to my own ears it sounded crazy. A conspiracy by the boy I'd saved? Edited videos? Staged encounters? My mom wanted to believe me. I could see it in her eyes, but doubt crept in. She asked why Mateo would do this. What could he possibly gain? I showed her the note from graduation, but she pointed out it wasn't signed. It could be from anyone. That night, I lay in bed scrolling through my phone, watching my reputation crumble in real time. Friends were unfriending me. College acquaintances were blocking me. 3 years of being known as the girl who saved a life were being erased, replaced by something much darker. Then I noticed something. In one of the videos, a reflection in a window, another person filming. Someone was helping Mateo. He wasn't doing this alone. I screenshot the image and zoomed in. The face was blurry but familiar. Eliza Caldwell, one of Mateo's new friends, the one who'd been most vocal about protecting him from me. I had my first piece of real evidence, but what could I do with it? Who would believe me? I wonder what Mateo's really thinking with this whole revenge plan he's got going on. He's clearly been planning this for a while, but why wait 3 whole years? There's something about the timing that makes me curious about what else might be going on in his life right now. And more importantly, what was Mateo's endgame? The note said he'd take everything from me piece by piece. My reputation was already in ruins. What came next? My phone buzzed. Another message, this time from an unknown number. This is just the beginning. Sweet dreams. Attached was a photo of my house taken from across the street. Tonight, I jumped up and looked out my window. The street was empty, but I knew he was out there, watching, planning, and I was running out of time to figure out how to stop him. I rushed to my parents' bedroom and shook my dad awake. He groaned and checked the clock, but when he saw my face, he sat up immediately. I showed him the photo and explained everything as quickly as I could. My dad grabbed a flashlight and headed outside while my mom called the police. The officers arrived within 15 minutes. They took my statement, examined the photo, and checked the area. They found nothing. No footprints, no evidence anyone had been there. One officer suggested it could have been taken earlier in the day with a timer. The other asked if I'd been having any conflicts with anyone recently. I tried explaining about Mateo, showing them the posts and videos. They took notes, but I could see the skepticism in their eyes. One officer pulled my parents aside. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I saw my mom's worried glances in my direction. After they left, my parents sat me down. My dad suggested maybe I should talk to someone, a therapist perhaps. My mom mentioned that the stress of graduation and starting college could affect people in different ways. They weren't saying they didn't believe me, but they weren't saying they did either. I spent the rest of the night wide awake, refreshing social media obsessively. More posts kept appearing, photos from different angles at the grocery store I hadn't even noticed being taken. Videos from graduation showing me staring at Mateo, each post carefully crafted to build a narrative of obsession. By morning, I had 17 missed calls from friends, not to check on me, but to tell me to stop, to leave Mateo alone, to get help. My best friend since middle school sent a long text about how disappointed she was, how she never thought I was that kind of girl. I decided to fight back. I created a document with timestamps, showing how the videos were edited, pointing out the inconsistencies. I wrote a long post explaining my side of the story, about saving Mateo's life, about the note, about everything. Within an hour, my post was gone, reported for harassment. My account was temporarily suspended for violating community guidelines. Meanwhile, Mateo's post remained up, gathering more views, more angry comments directed at me. My college orientation was in 3 days. I'd been looking forward to it for months. A fresh start at a school 2 hours away where nobody knew my history. Now I wondered if the story would follow me there too. That afternoon, I drove to the mall to buy supplies for my dorm. I kept my head down, avoiding eye contact with anyone who might recognize me. I was loading bags into my car when I heard a familiar voice. Eliza Caldwell stood behind me with 2 other girls I recognized from school. They weren't threatening exactly, just standing there, watching. Eliza held up her phone, not recording this time, just showing me the screen. It was a group chat with over 50 members. The group name was Protecting M. She scrolled through the messages, people discussing my whereabouts, sharing sightings, planning ways to intervene if I got too close to Mateo. Some messages were from people I'd never even met, strangers who'd joined the cause after seeing the viral videos. Eliza put her phone away, and the three of them walked off without saying a word. The message was clear. I was being watched by an entire network of people who believed I was dangerous. I drove home in a daze. This was bigger than just Mateo now. He'd created a movement, turned himself into a symbol of survival, and me into a symbol of everything wrong with girls who couldn't handle rejection. The truth didn't matter anymore. The narrative had taken on a life of its own. That evening, my mom knocked on my door. She'd been crying. Someone had sent messages to her workplace, warning them about her dangerous daughter. Her boss had called her in for a meeting. While he wasn't taking any action yet, he'd suggested she might want to take some time off until things calmed down. My dad was in the living room on his laptop, his face grim. He showed me what he'd found. Someone had created a website dedicated to exposing me. It had all the videos, the photos, screenshots of supposed conversations where I'd said disturbing things. The conversations were fake, but they looked real enough. The website had a counter at the bottom. Days since last incident, 0. It updated every time someone reported seeing me near Mateo, even if I was just existing in the same town. My parents were trying to be supportive, but I could see the strain. My mom kept asking if there was something I wasn't telling them. My dad mentioned that maybe I should postpone college for a semester, let things die down. The doubt in their voices hurt more than all the online hate combined. That night, I made a decision. I needed evidence, real evidence that Mateo was orchestrating this. I started with Eliza Caldwell. I found her social media profiles, looked through her history. 3 months ago, right around when Mateo returned to school, her posts changed. Suddenly, she was all about mental health awareness, sewer slide prevention, protecting survivors. And in every post about Mateo, there was something subtle, a phrase, a hashtag, something that felt coordinated. I dug deeper, found connections between Eliza and the other people most active in posting about me. They all seemed to have become friends with Mateo around the same time. They all used similar language in their posts. It was organized, planned. Then I found something interesting, a photo from a party 2 weeks before graduation. In the background, barely visible, was Mateo's laptop. The screen showed a document titled Project Restoration. I zoomed in as much as I could. I could make out what looked like phases, timelines, goals. It wasn't much, but it was something. I saved everything, creating my own folder of evidence. But I knew I needed more. I needed someone on the inside, someone who could confirm what Mateo was planning. I thought of Liam, a boy from our biology class who'd been friends with Mateo before everything happened. He'd been one of the people who hadn't immediately taken sides after the intervention. Maybe he'd listen. I found Liam working at the bookstore downtown. He saw me coming and his face went tight, but he didn't run or call for help. I approached carefully, keeping my hands visible, maintaining distance. I asked if we could talk. He hesitated, glanced around the empty store, then nodded toward the back corner. We sat at a small reading table, his body tense, ready to bolt. I explained everything as calmly as I could. The note, the videos, the coordination. Liam listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he told me something that made my blood run cold. Mateo had approached him months ago, wanting him to join what he called his recovery project. He'd explained it as a way to take back control, to show that survivors could be empowered. But the details had made Liam uncomfortable. The talk of justice, of making sure people understood consequences of teaching lessons. Liam had declined to join, and Mateo had cut him off completely. Now Liam was seeing the results play out online, and he was scared. Not of me, but of what Mateo was capable of. He agreed to help, but carefully. He still had access to some group chats, could see some of the planning. He warned me that Mateo was smart, careful. Everything was designed to look organic, spontaneous. The people helping him genuinely believed they were protecting a victim. Over the next few days, Liam fed me information. Mateo had phases planned out. First was isolation, cutting me off from support systems. Second was escalation, making me seem increasingly dangerous. The third phase was something called resolution, but Liam couldn't find details about what that meant. I was living in a constant state of anxiety. Every time I left the house, I was photographed. Every move I made was documented and twisted. My parents were getting pressure from all sides. Old friends were cutting contact. The college I was supposed to attend had called about concerns they'd received. Then Mateo made a mistake. He got overconfident. I was at the gas station when he appeared, like always, with his phone out. But this time, he spoke to me directly, quietly while pretending to text. He told me I could make it all stop. All I had to do was publicly admit that I'd saved his life for selfish reasons, that I'd been obsessed with him, that I'd violated his autonomy. He had a statement prepared. If I posted it, recorded a video saying it, he'd call off his campaign. I asked why he was doing this. His face hardened. He said I'd stolen his choice, his moment of control. I'd made him into a victim, a statistic, someone to be saved. He'd spent 3 years being treated like broken glass, and it was my fault. Now he was taking back control by showing everyone what I really was. I recorded our conversation on my phone in my pocket. The quality was poor, but you could hear his voice, his words. Finally, I had something concrete. But when I tried to use it, I hit another wall. The audio was too muffled, too easy to claim as fake. Mateo quickly spun it as me trying to create false evidence, proof of how desperate and dangerous I was becoming. The harassment intensified. My parents reached a breaking point. My mom was put on administrative leave from work. Eliza showing up with her phone like some kind of social media bounty hunter is peak modern drama. Forget pitchforks and torches. Now we get group chats and location tracking to run people out of town. My dad's clients were calling, concerned about his family situation. They sat me down and suggested maybe I should stay with my aunt in another state for a while, just until things calmed down. I realized this was exactly what Mateo wanted, to drive me away, to make me run. But I was running out of options, and my family was suffering. I agreed to think about it. That night, Liam sent me an urgent message. He'd found something about Phase 3, about resolution. It was planned for next week, right before I was supposed to leave for college. He didn't have all the details, but it involved a final confrontation, something that would cement the narrative forever. I stayed up all night thinking. Mateo had built a perfect trap. If I fought back, I looked guilty. If I ran, I looked guilty. If I did nothing, the harassment would continue until something broke. My family was cracking under the pressure. My future was evaporating. But then I remembered something. The school's security cameras, the ones that had captured the edited footage of me following Mateo. The full unedited versions would show the truth. They'd show him waiting for me, orchestrating the encounter. The problem was getting access. The school was closed for summer, and I definitely couldn't just walk in and ask. But I knew someone who might help, Mr. Bennett, the teacher Mateo had planned to traumatize with his live stream. He was still at the school teaching summer classes. I reached out through email, carefully explaining the situation. I didn't expect a response, but the next morning, he replied. He wanted to meet. We met at a coffee shop the next town over. Mr. Bennett looked tired, older than I remembered. He told me he'd been watching what was happening online, and something felt wrong to him. He taught both Mateo and me. He knew our characters. He couldn't give me the footage directly, but he could file a request for it as part of a broader review of school safety protocols. It would take time, but it was something. As we talked, he mentioned something that caught my attention. After Mateo had returned to school, he'd written an essay for his class about reclaiming power after trauma. He'd been impressed by his writing, but disturbed by some of the content. The essay had talked about justice, about balance, about making sure those who hurt you understood pain. He'd kept a copy, as he did with all concerning student work. He couldn't share it with me directly, but he suggested that if authorities ever got involved, it might be relevant. I left the meeting with the first real hope I'd felt in weeks, but I also knew I was running out of time. Liam's warnings about Phase 3 loomed. Mateo was planning something big, something final. The next few days were a whirlwind of preparation. I documented everything I could. Liam carefully gathered more information. My parents, despite their doubts, started to see the patterns I'd been pointing out. The coordination was too perfect, the escalation too calculated. Then Liam got the details about Phase 3. Mateo was planning to stage a final confrontation, one where I would appear to attack him. He had people ready to witness it, to film it. He'd studied my patterns, knew where I'd be. It would be the final proof of how dangerous I was, justification for whatever came next. But knowing his plan gave me an advantage. For the first time since this started, I could prepare. I could choose not to be where he expected. I could have my own witnesses. I could finally turn his trap against him. The day arrived faster than expected. I was supposed to be at the bank that morning, something Mateo had learned through his network. Instead, I sent my dad in my place while I stayed home. Sure enough, he reported seeing Mateo there with several people, all positioned strategically, all with phones ready. When I didn't show, I could imagine his frustration. His carefully laid plan disrupted, but I knew he wouldn't give up. He'd adapt, find another opportunity. That afternoon, he did something desperate. He came to my house. I was in my room when I heard the doorbell. My mom answered, and I heard Mateo's voice, sweet and concerned, asking if I was home. He was worried about me, he said. He'd heard I was struggling and wanted to help, to clear the air. My mom, still hoping for a resolution, invited him in. I heard them in the living room, Mateo spinning a story about misunderstandings, about wanting to move forward. My mom called for me to come down. I knew this was it, another trap, but I also knew I couldn't hide forever. I grabbed my phone, started recording, and went downstairs. Mateo sat on our couch, looking small and vulnerable, the perfect victim. When he saw me, his eyes widened with what looked like fear, but I caught the slight smirk before he hid it. He started talking about forgiveness, about moving past everything. He stood up, moved closer to me. I stayed perfectly still, keeping my distance, making sure my phone captured everything. Then he made his move. He suddenly gasped, stepped back, and knocked over a lamp. It shattered on the floor as he screamed that I'd tried to grab him. But my mom had seen everything. I hadn't moved. I'd stayed exactly where I was. For the first time, Mateo's mask slipped. He looked between us, realizing his mistake. My mom had witnessed the truth. The performance hadn't worked. Mateo tried to recover, claiming he'd been startled, that he was jumpy around me. But the damage was done. My mom asked him to leave. As Mateo gathered his things, he looked at me with pure hatred. At the door, he leaned close and whispered that this wasn't over. He'd make sure everyone knew what kind of person I was, but his threat felt hollow now. He'd overplayed his hand. After he left, my mom sat in shocked silence. She'd seen it with her own eyes, the manipulation, the performance. For the first time since this all started, she fully believed me. We called my dad home from work. Together, we reviewed everything I documented. The patterns were clear now. The coordination, the escalation, the calculated nature of it all. My parents were angry, not at me, but at themselves for doubting, at Mateo for what he'd put our family through. But we still needed more. Mateo's network was still active, still spreading the narrative. One failed attempt wouldn't stop him. We needed something definitive. That's when Mr. Bennett called. He'd managed to get the security footage through proper channels. He couldn't share it with me directly, but he'd reviewed it as part of the safety protocol assessment. What he'd seen had concerned him enough that he'd felt obligated to report it to the school administration and involve law enforcement. The footage clearly showed Mateo waiting for me, positioning himself, preparing his phone. It showed him approaching me, not the other way around. It contradicted every claim he'd made about that encounter. Things moved quickly after that. The school administration, worried about liability, launched their own investigation. They found more footage, more evidence of coordination. Some of Mateo's helpers, when questioned officially, admitted to being asked to film certain encounters, to post certain things. The house of cards was starting to collapse. Liam risked everything to provide one final piece of evidence. Screenshots from the planning chat, where Mateo had explicitly outlined his goals, his phases, his intention to destroy my life as payback for saving his. The messages were damning, showing clear intent and malice. But even as the truth started to emerge, I felt no satisfaction. Mateo was clearly struggling with mental health issues, trauma from his sewers lied attempt and the aftermath. He'd channeled his pain into revenge, but it came from a place of genuine hurt. The online narrative began to shift. People who'd been so quick to condemn me were now unsure. Some apologized, others simply disappeared, deleting their posts and comments. The website about me went offline. My parents' workplaces backed off. Friends began reaching out, tentatively, apologetically. The college called to say they were no longer concerned about the allegations. But the damage was done. My reputation was in tatters. He'd needed to feel in control of something, and destroying me had given him that feeling. However briefly, I deleted the message without responding. There was nothing left to say. My parents drove me to college on a gray August morning. We didn't talk much on the drive. We were all exhausted, worn down by months of harassment and fear. But we were together. We'd survived. As we unloaded my things at the dorm, I noticed other families doing the same. Normal families with normal problems, kids excited about their futures, parents proud and worried in equal measure. I envied them their simplicity. My roommate seemed nice enough. She didn't recognize my name, didn't know my story. It was a fresh start, or as fresh as it could be with the internet existing. I knew the story would follow me eventually. Someone would make the connection, spread the word. But for now, I could pretend to be just another freshman. Security footage that perfectly shows everything. How convenient that Mr. Bennett just happens to get access right when it's needed most. The timing of Mateo's desperate house visit feels oddly calculated too. He's been so careful until now. Why suddenly get sloppy in front of witnesses? That night, alone in my dorm room, I thought about choices. The choice I'd made to save Mateo. The choice he'd made to destroy me. The choices we'd both have to live with forever. I'd saved his life, but I'd also taken something from him. He'd tried to take everything from me in return. Neither of us had won. We'd both lost something in the exchange. My phone buzzed with a text from my mom checking in, then one from Liam, wishing me luck. Even Mr. Bennett sent a brief email, hoping I was settling in well. These people had stood by me when everything seemed lost. That had to count for something. I looked around my small dorm room, at the blank walls waiting to be filled with new memories, new experiences. This wasn't the college experience I'd imagined, but it was mine. The next morning, I woke up to my roommate's alarm. She groaned, threw a pillow at it, and asked if I wanted to grab breakfast. I said yes. It was a small thing, a normal thing, but after months of anything but normal, it felt like a victory. Classes started. I threw myself into them, grateful for the distraction. Psychology, ironically, became my favorite. Understanding why people do what they do, how trauma shapes behavior, how pain can twist into something destructive. Weeks passed. The story didn't follow me as quickly as I'd feared. When it finally did surface, my hallmates' reactions surprised me. Some were curious, some sympathetic. A few avoided me. But most seemed to understand that there were two sides to every story. I even made friends, real ones, who knew my history and chose to know me anyway. We didn't talk about it much, but when we did, they listened without judgment. One night, studying in the library, I saw a news article about Mateo. He was speaking at a mental health awareness event, sharing his story of survival. The article mentioned the girl who'd called for help, saving his life. It didn't name me, and the tone was neutral, factual. He was healing in his own way, finding his own path forward. I closed the article and went back to my studies. We were both moving on separately, carrying our scars and our stories. The boy with pretty eyes who'd wanted to die. The girl who'd saved him and paid the price. Two kids who'd made choices that changed everything. My phone buzzed. A text from a study group asking if I was coming. I packed up my things and headed out into the night, toward voices and laughter, and the possibility of normal college drama that had nothing to do with the past. The truth was, I'd do it again. Even knowing the cost, I'd still make that call because Mateo was alive. Troubled, angry, but alive. He had the chance to heal, to grow, to become whoever he was meant to be. That had to be worth something. As I walked across campus, I thought about second chances. How Mateo had gotten his, even if he hadn't wanted it. How I was getting mine now, building a life beyond what had happened. We'd probably never speak again. The damage was too deep, the hurt, too raw. But somewhere out there, he was living the life I'd helped give back to him. And here I was, living mine. It wasn't the ending either of us had planned, but it was an ending we could both live with. The first sign that my fresh start wasn't as fresh as I'd hoped came during my second month at college. I was walking back from my psychology lecture when I noticed a familiar figure across the quad. My stomach dropped. Eliza Caldwell stood near the student union, talking to someone from my dorm. I ducked into the library, my heart racing. Eliza being here couldn't be a coincidence. The college was 2 hours from home, and she'd never mentioned plans to visit. I watched through the window as she showed something on her phone to the student, who nodded and pointed toward my dorm building. That evening, I found my roommate acting strange. She kept glancing at me while pretending to study, and her phone buzzed constantly with messages. When I asked if everything was okay, she mumbled something about being tired and left for the common room. Over the next few days, the atmosphere in my dorm shifted. Conversations stopped when I entered rooms. People who'd been friendly suddenly had somewhere else to be. The study group stopped inviting me. My new friends became mysteriously busy. I recognized the pattern immediately. The isolation phase, just like before. But how? Mateo was supposed to be getting help, focusing on his own recovery unless he wasn't. Liam texted me late one night with a warning. He'd seen activity in some of the old group chats. Mateo had been discharged from the hospital weeks ago. He'd convinced his doctors he was better, that he understood his mistakes. But Liam had heard through mutual friends that Mateo had been planning something new, something he called his final project. I started documenting everything again. The strange looks, the whispered conversations, the way people suddenly had their phones out when I walked by. But this time, I wasn't going to wait for things to escalate. I needed to get ahead of whatever Mateo was planning. My psychology professor had assigned us to write about trauma responses in recovery. As I researched, I found myself understanding Mateo's behavior more clearly. The need for control, the inability to let go, the way trauma could manifest as aggression toward those perceived as taking away agency. It didn't excuse what he was doing, but it helped me see the pattern. Then I found the Instagram account. Truth About Predators had started posting 3 weeks ago, right when Mateo was discharged. The posts were careful, no names mentioned, but the details were unmistakable. Stories about a female student who had a history of stalking vulnerable men. Security footage that looked suspiciously like my dorm building. Photos taken from angles that suggested someone had been following me. The account grew quickly. My college had a strong culture around protecting survivors, and the posts were crafted to tap into that. Soon I started seeing people I didn't recognize watching me in the dining hall, following me between classes. I tried reporting the account, but it kept popping up under new names, each time more sophisticated, more believable. Mateo had learned from his mistakes. This time, he wasn't directly connected to anything. He was letting others do the work, creating a movement that seemed organic. My grades started slipping. How could I focus on calculus when I knew people were photographing me in class? How could I write essays when my laptop might be compromised? The paranoia was suffocating, which was exactly what he wanted. One night my roommate finally broke. She showed me the messages she'd been getting, anonymous accounts warning her about living with a dangerous person, links to articles about campus safety, stories that sounded just real enough to plant doubt. She said she'd requested a room change for her own safety. I spent that night in the library, afraid to go back to my dorm. That's when I met Alexa. She was a junior, working the late shift at the help desk. She noticed I'd been there every night that week and asked if I was okay. Something about her genuine concern broke through my walls. I found myself telling her everything, not the whole story, but enough. About someone from my past trying to destroy my reputation. About feeling trapped and alone. Alexa listened without judgment. Then she told me about her freshman year, when her ex had started a smear campaign against her after their breakup. How she'd learned to document everything, to build a support network, to refuse to let someone else's pain destroy her future. She introduced me to others who'd faced similar situations. Not a formal support group, just students who understood what it was like to be targeted. They taught me practical things: how to check for hidden cameras, how to secure my social media, how to recognize manipulation tactics. But Mateo was escalating faster than I could adapt. The Instagram accounts became more specific, more damaging. They started including details that only someone from our high school would know, twisted just enough to sound sinister. My name was never mentioned, but anyone who knew me could connect the dots. The campus security called me in for a meeting. They'd received multiple reports about my behavior. Nothing specific enough to take action on, but enough to create a file. They suggested I might benefit from counseling, gave me pamphlets about appropriate behavior. The security officer's expression made it clear he thought where there was smoke, there was fire. I was losing again. But this time I had people who believed me. Alexa and her friends helped me create my own documentation. We tracked the IP addresses of the anonymous accounts, found patterns in the posting times, identified stock photos being used to create fake victims. Then Liam sent another urgent message. He'd overheard something terrifying. Mateo was coming to campus, not just visiting, but moving here. He'd convinced his parents that being near me would help his healing process, that facing his trauma was necessary for recovery. They'd helped him get an apartment off campus. The next phase was beginning, and I knew it would be worse than before. On campus, he'd have access to everything: my schedule, my habits, my safe spaces. He could orchestrate encounters that would look random, but weren't. He could build his narrative in real time. I considered leaving, transferring schools, starting over somewhere else, but running would confirm every lie he'd spread. And there was no guarantee he wouldn't follow me again. This had to end here. Alexa helped me prepare. We mapped out campus, identifying cameras and blind spots. We created a buddy system, ensuring I was never alone in vulnerable situations. We even reached out to Mr. Bennett, who provided a written statement about what he'd witnessed, though we knew it wouldn't carry much weight here. Eliza playing detective with her phone while pretending to be casual visitor is peak. I'm definitely not here to cause drama energy. Buddy, everyone knows you don't travel 2 hours just to admire campus architecture. The day Mateo arrived on campus, I felt it immediately. The atmosphere shifted. People who'd started to doubt the rumors suddenly had new conviction. Fresh stories circulated. New witnesses came forward with concerns. I saw him for the first time outside the psychology building. He looked different, healthier, more confident. He was talking to a group of students, gesturing animatedly. When he noticed me, he didn't react, just continued his conversation as if I didn't exist. But I knew this was calculated. He was establishing himself as a presence on campus, building relationships, creating his network. Every interaction was a move in his game. The encounters started small. He'd appear in the coffee shop right after I arrived, forcing me to decide whether to stay or leave. He'd sit in the back of the lecture hall for my psychology class, even though he wasn't enrolled. He was everywhere and nowhere, visible but untouchable. My new friends started getting targeted. Alexa received anonymous threats. Others found their social media hacked, embarrassing photos posted. The message was clear. Supporting me came with a cost. Some distanced themselves. I couldn't blame them. But others, like Alexa, doubled down. She said she'd faced bullies before and wasn't about to let another one win. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. My psychology professor pulled me aside after class. She'd noticed Mateo attending lectures without being enrolled. She'd also received several anonymous emails about me that felt orchestrated. As someone who studied human behavior, she recognized manipulation when she saw it. She couldn't intervene directly, but she suggested I look into the college's policies on harassment and stalking, not to file a report since that would likely backfire, but to understand my rights and options. She also mentioned that the college took unauthorized access to classes seriously. That gave me an idea. Instead of defending against Mateo's attacks, I could document his actual violations, attending classes he wasn't enrolled in, accessing buildings with someone else's ID, creating a hostile environment for enrolled students. Alexa and I spent weeks carefully documenting everything. We didn't focus on the anonymous accounts or the rumors. Instead, we tracked Mateo's physical presence. When he attended my classes, when he appeared in my dorm building without authorization, when he photographed me without consent. The evidence pile grew. Security footage of him tailgating into restricted buildings. Sign-in logs showing he'd lied about his reasons for being on campus. Photos of him taking pictures of me during lectures. But I knew documentation alone wouldn't stop him. He needed to overplay his hand again, like he had at my house. I needed to create a situation where his mask would slip in front of witnesses. The opportunity came during a campus safety workshop. The topic was bystander intervention, and I knew Mateo wouldn't miss the chance to attend. Sure enough, he was there, sitting with a group of students he'd befriended. During the discussion portion, the facilitator asked about personal experiences with feeling unsafe on campus. I raised my hand, calmly, without naming names. I described being followed between classes, photographed without consent, and having someone attend my lectures without being enrolled. I watched Mateo's face tighten. This wasn't part of his script. When the facilitator asked follow-up questions, I provided specific details. The dates, the times, the locations. Other students started nodding, recognizing the behaviors. Mateo couldn't help himself. He interrupted, saying that sometimes people misinterpret innocent actions as threatening, that maybe the person I was describing had their own reasons for being in those places. His voice was controlled, but I could see the anger underneath. The facilitator, trained in recognizing manipulation, picked up on the dynamic immediately. She redirected the conversation, but I saw her make a note. After the workshop, she asked to speak with both Mateo and me separately. I went first, providing my documentation. The facilitator's expression grew more concerned as she reviewed it. This wasn't about rumors or social media anymore. This was about concrete policy violations. When Mateo emerged from his meeting, his face was flushed. He'd been informed that attending classes without enrollment was grounds for removal from campus, that photographing students without consent violated privacy policies, that he needed to provide legitimate reasons for his presence in campus buildings. But Mateo wasn't done. That night, the anonymous accounts exploded with new content. Fake screenshots of messages I'd supposedly sent, doctored photos suggesting inappropriate behavior, a coordinated campaign to destroy me before the administration could act. My phone rang at 2 a.m. It was Alexa, panicked. Someone had called the police, reporting that I was planning something dangerous. Multiple anonymous tips had come in. The police were looking for me. I stayed calm, called campus security myself, and explained the situation. I was in my dorm room, exactly where I was supposed to be. When the officers arrived, I cooperated fully. They quickly realized the reports were false, but the damage was done. Another file, another record of police involvement. The next morning, I made a decision. I was done playing defense. I walked into the administration building and filed a formal complaint, not about the rumors or the social media campaign, but about the documented policy violations. The unauthorized class attendance, the illegal photography, the false police reports. I named Mateo directly, provided all my evidence, the security footage, the witness statements, the pattern of behavior. I also included Mr. Bennett's statement and the documentation from high school, establishing a pattern of harassment. The administration had to act. This wasn't about he said, she said anymore. This was about clear violations with evidence. They launched an investigation. Mateo tried to spin it as retaliation, but the evidence was too strong. The security footage didn't lie. The false police reports could be traced. His own friends, when questioned officially, admitted he'd asked them to watch me, to report my movements. The investigation took 2 weeks. During that time, Mateo escalated desperately. He staged another confrontation, this time in the dining hall, trying to provoke a reaction. But I was ready. I kept my distance, stayed calm, let his performance play out in front of hundreds of witnesses. When he realized I wouldn't engage, he made his biggest mistake. He grabbed my arm as I tried to leave, screaming that I was running away again, that I couldn't face what I'd done. But this time, dozens of phones captured the truth. Me trying to leave peacefully, him physically preventing me, his aggression, not mine. Security intervened. The whole incident was recorded on multiple cameras. There was no way to edit or spin what had happened. Mateo had finally shown his true face in a way that couldn't be denied. The administration's decision came down a week later. Mateo was banned from campus. His unauthorized presence would be considered trespassing. The false police reports had been referred to local authorities. Several students who'd helped spread false information received warnings. But even in defeat, Mateo tried one last manipulation. He posted a long message on social media about being silenced, about powerful institutions protecting predators. Some people believed him. They always would. But the majority saw through it now. The evidence was too overwhelming. I thought it was over. But a month later, I received a letter, not from Mateo, but from his parents. They apologized for not seeing what their son was doing. They explained that he was getting real help now, intensive therapy with specialists who understood his condition. They thanked me for saving his life 3 years ago, even though he couldn't see it that way. They also included a letter from Mateo. I hesitated before opening it. His handwriting was different, less controlled. He didn't apologize exactly, but he acknowledged what he'd done. He wrote about the therapy, about understanding his need for control, about learning to live with the choice I'd taken from him. He ended by saying he was transferring to a school across the country, that we'd never cross paths again. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. But I kept the letter as a reminder that even our darkest choices can come from places of deep pain. The rest of my freshman year passed quietly. The rumors faded. New scandals replaced old ones. Some people still looked at me suspiciously, but most moved on. I rejoined study groups, made new friends, rebuilt what had been torn down. Alexa became my closest friend. We'd been through something intense together, and that created a bond. She introduced me to her boyfriend Oliver, who'd had his own experience with a stalker. The three of us formed our own support network. My grades recovered. My psychology professor became a mentor, helping me understand not just what had happened, but why. I wrote my final paper on trauma responses and the cycle of victim and aggressor. It was the best work I'd ever done. Liam stayed in touch. He was proud of how I'd handled everything, how I'd found a way to fight back without becoming cruel myself. He was applying to law school, inspired by seeing how the system could work when properly engaged. Mr. Bennett sent an email near the end of the year. He'd heard about what happened at college and wanted me to know he was proud of how I'd handled it. He reminded me that saving a life was never wrong, even when the person couldn't appreciate it. Summer arrived with its promise of a fresh start. I decided to stay on campus, taking classes and working in the library. Mateo's parents writing to thank her for saving their son's life while he was actively trying to destroy hers seems oddly timed. The whole family dynamic here feels strange. Where were they during all this stalking and harassment that apparently required intensive therapy with specialists? I needed to reclaim this space as mine, to build new memories that weren't tainted by fear and paranoia. One evening, I was studying in my favorite spot when my phone buzzed. For a moment, my heart raced, expecting another anonymous threat. But it was just my mom, sending pictures from a family barbecue. Normal, everyday life continuing despite everything. I realized then that Mateo hadn't won. He'd tried to take everything from me piece by piece, but I'd rebuilt each time. My family still loved me. I had real friends who'd stood by me. I was still in college, still moving toward my future. The scars were there. I still checked over my shoulder more than I should. I still felt my pulse quicken when I saw someone who looked like him, but I was just like he was. As I packed up my books that night, I thought about the strange symmetry of it all. 3 years ago, I'd saved Mateo's life and changed both our futures. He'd spent years trying to destroy mine in return. But in the end, we were both still here, still fighting, still trying to find our way forward. The campus was quiet as I walked back to my dorm. Summer students moved in small groups, laughing about something on someone's phone. The normalcy of it felt like a gift. I was just another student walking home, anonymous in the best way. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Alexa, asking if I wanted to grab pizza with her and Oliver. I smiled and texted back. Yes, life was moving forward, one normal moment at a time. That's all I'd wanted from the beginning. Not to be a hero or a villain, just to be a regular college student worried about exams and weekend plans. Mateo had tried to take that from me, but he'd failed. I was still here, still myself, still choosing to see the good in people despite everything. As I entered my dorm, I made a decision. I would take the lessons from this experience, but I wouldn't let it define me. I'd saved a life once and paid a price for it, but I'd also learned to save my own life, to fight for my own future. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but they'd be normal ones. Classes to attend, papers to write, friends to meet. The kind of problems I dreamed of having during those dark days when Mateo's campaign was at its worst. I climbed the stairs to my room, feeling lighter than I had in months. Whatever came next, I was ready for it. Not because I was strong or special, but because I'd learned that sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to be destroyed. The door to my room closed behind me with a quiet click. Outside, life on campus continued. Inside, I opened my laptop and started working on my summer coursework. Just another student, just another night, just another step toward whatever future I could build. It wasn't the ending either of us had planned 3 years ago, but it was real. And it was mine, and that was enough. Thanks for hanging out and letting me toss in my clever takes. Always fun being your witty sidekick for the ride. Catch you on the flip side. If you made it to the end, drop a comment. I love reading all your comments.